Sunday, October 20th, the Portland Film Festival has been underway all week long, presented by Comcast. And before it's over, there will be a screening of films that are highly unique. They are made by veterans as part of a project led by an author and filmmaker named Benjamin Patton. And he's on the phone right now. Hello, Ben Patton.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, John.
Thank you for joining us. Now, Benjamin Patton knows a lot about films, and he knows a lot about veterans, because we might as well tell the folks, you are whose grandson?
Well, my grandfather was General George S. Patton Jr. from World War II, and my father was also Major General from the Vietnam and Korean War eras, also George S. Patton. There are plenty of Georges in this family.
That's right. Your father and grandfather, famous, renowned generals. Now, did you see military service yourself?
I didn't. I seriously considered the Navy for a long time in my teens, and I just made a different choice. You know, we weren't pressed in a particular combat engagement at that time, and I decided that my father and grandfather had maxed the course in that area, so I decided to try something different. But I'm delighted that my career has now circled back to be able to allow me the opportunity to work with veterans on a full-time basis.
Absolutely. As a filmmaker and a film educator, you're certainly serving now in a project that involves veterans making films. Now, tell me about the Patton Veterans Project. What made you decide to do that?
Well, interestingly, I had worked for years as an instructor of teens for summer film camps, and I started to see a lot of teenagers that were making films around adolescent identity, and I began to wonder whether that same process of forming identity and reforming identity through film would be helpful to a veteran that was coming back from a combat theater seeking their new norm. And I think that that's what proved to be true. There are a lot of things that veterans experience that they just can't talk about in a normal way, but our premise was that perhaps they could make a film about it.
And how does that work? How do you teach them?
Well, what happens is we pull together a handful of professional filmmakers and film instructors, and we go to places like VAs or military bases or other nonprofit organizations associated with the military, and veterans come to ostensibly to learn how to make movies for the weekend. But what they find is that they're learning about narrative, they're learning about collaboration, and they're learning ways to express and articulate experiences they've had that often defy words on film. So over the course of a weekend, they will collaborate with one another, they'll brainstorm ideas, and they'll come out at the other end of it with a film made with 2 or 3 veterans together that again, channels some aspect of military service that may be difficult to discuss, but is often very, very powerful visually.
Absolutely. Now, talk about the ways that this helps veterans with such realities that they're dealing with, such as PTSD.
Well, what's interesting is it does help with the realities, but I think what's unique about what we do is the veteran themselves get to choose how far they re-immerse themselves in past experiences. You might say that this splits the difference between it splits the difference between re-immersion and avoidance altogether, because the veteran gets to choose who they work with, what the film is about, whether they are in the film, what role they play. They get to decide everything about how the film is made and what's in it, what's in that 16 by 9 square. And I think that's what's powerful. They're not being told to walk down a treadmill and was surrounded by video screens or anything like that. They're actually allowed the opportunity to choose themselves. And so I think the key elements to it are collaboration, which allows the veteran to work with other veterans in a kind of a team/unit mentality, and also this sense of agency. Because they get to choose how they're going to interact with their history, it gives them a feeling of agency, a feeling of self-reliance, of validation. And on the other side of that, when they've made a film that expresses something powerful about what they've experienced, there's a sense of empowerment. And I think those are the 3 keys to it. And I think the final element is one that impacts the audiences, and that we'll find, I think, when we show these films at the Portland Film Festival this weekend, that these veterans are feeling validated by being able to see their films up on the screen, just as the audience is also likewise developing a stronger understanding of the veterans about whom they're seeing the films.
And the Patton Veterans Project has come to Portland. Local veterans here in Portland have been making films, and they'll be screening films Sunday, October 20th, this date, at 1:30 p.m. at the Hilo Hotel on Harvey Milk Boulevard, Harvey Milk Street, here in downtown Portland. Tell me about some of the films.
Well, I mean, there's some wonderful films. There's the one I'll mention. There's a big problem is of course homelessness in the military, and there are a lot of organizations that work toward reducing that. But one of the films is focused on homelessness among female veterans, and I think you'll find it a very powerful portrayal of that subject, which is very, very difficult to portray and very difficult for these veterans to want to even work on because it's so close to home for many of them that have actually been homeless. So that's one of the films, and there'll be some others that I think we want to surprise the audience, but they all deal with things that in some way have touched a veteran's life, and whether or not it's a factual thing or it's somewhat fictionalized or what we would call archetypal, which is representative of kind of a larger idea, in one way or another it channels the experience of these veterans, and it's their hope that they can get these stories out there, as we want to do at all of our workshops that we do as a service to veterans and as a therapy for veterans.
What have you noticed about veterans as filmmakers, given their experiences, whether in combat or not? Do they see things in some unique, veteran-like way that's reflected in the eyes of the camera?
I do. I think that they see things in a very complex way. I think that's partly to do with the younger generations, the millennials and the younger veterans. Really, I think as people are more exposed to video and all the different ways in which we, access our iPhones and our iPads, the way people see nowadays in general is much more complex. They see a lot more. And I think also the PTSD is a multisensory disability anomaly, so you're taking in things through your sense of smell, your sight, your hearing, your touch, and a lot of these things can be accessed through this incredibly robust medium of video. I mean, it encompasses most other mediums really, and you can see and hear and almost feel things emotionally through a film. And I think that's one of the things actually that film does very, very well is it portrays or expresses emotion. And so I think that the life of a veteran is one that's filled with a lot of very emotional and traumatic experiences, and they're not all bad. I mean, many veterans, you would ask them, about their experience, and even the ones that have PTSD would say, I would do it all over again. And that's why the life of a soldier or serviceman or woman is very complex, because it's not all negative.
How do veterans react to you knowing your family pedigree?
Interesting question. I think it depends. There's a lot of people that certainly recall the movie Patton and certainly think of my grandfather, and I'm always warmed when people come to me that have heard of my father, because he was my hero, really. And actually, he was even more decorated than his father, if you can believe it. But I've actually had people that served under my father do the workshops, and it's always just a wonderful thing when I get to connect with that generation, because that was a generation that wasn't so heartily welcomed back, to the States when they came back from war. They came back to, being spat on and you're a baby killer and things like that. And so I think they were just as much serving their country as the folks of the greatest generation. But anyway, I generally get a positive reaction, but not everybody loves the General Patton. Not everybody loved the General's Patton, I must say. So they had their enemies too. They were often equal opportunity offenders, but they were wonderful soldiers. And I think the thing that made them stand out among a lot of others was that they really made a special effort to take care of their troops. And I'd like to think that I have one general on one shoulder and another on another shoulder, and they're showing me how to care for our veterans in a new way as they come home from war and they come home from service.
Well, that's so thoughtful. You wrote a book titled Growing Up Patton. What was it like growing up as a Patton? What do you see in yourself that makes you go, yep, that's a Patton thing?
Well, look, I can't lie. I had a great time as a kid, and we traveled the world. We moved 11 times before I was 13. We got to live in Germany 3 times. I learned to speak different languages and meet people from different cultures. So there wasn't a lot of negative associated with it. I think it was, it was a wonderful experience. I also love the fact that I got to be around the military. Although I didn't ultimately choose to enter the military, growing up in that milieu and going to mess halls every morning with my father and going hunting and fishing with his soldiers that we did every weekend was just a blast. So I have really nothing to regret from my childhood. I'm just, as I said, delighted that I have found a way to serve through filmmaking and my other area, which is psychology, and help veterans in a way that maybe is, in a certain sense, I'm more suited for, and so I'm delighted to be a part of this family, and I'm very proud of all the members of my family who have served in different ways. Not the least of which are the spouses. My mother is also very involved with the military, although she didn't serve in uniform.
It's the Patton Veterans Project. The screening 1:30 p.m. today at the High-Low Hotel as part of the Portland Film Festival presented by Comcast, and you can get ticket info at portlandfilmfestival.com. And you have a YouTube channel, too, where a lot of the work can be seen, right?
Yes, we do. We have a YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube and type in the Patton Veterans Project or the name of our workshop, which is called I Was There Films, and you can find us. And also you can find us online at pattonveteransproject.org, because we are a nonprofit organization and we rely on the support of individuals and corporations and foundations to keep us able to do what we're doing.
And that is the leader of the Patton Veterans Project, Benjamin Patton. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, John, for having me on, and it's a pleasure to meet you, at least virtually.